Tonight, we journey into the shadows, unraveling stories of terrifying encounters with entities from realms beyond. If you think you're brave enough, join us as we delve into accounts that defy logic and chill the soul. But beware, each tale serves as a haunting reminder that some doors should remain closed. Title: Echoes of the Past. The crisp winter air of January 1971 greeted the Morgan family as they arrived at their new home. A sprawling farmhouse nestled on the outskirts of a small town in New England. Thomas Morgan, a rugged man in his late 30s, stepped out of the family van, exhaling a cloud of frosty breath. Beside him, Sarah, his wife and the glue of their family, smiled nervously at their 3 daughters, each one bundled up against the cold. "Are we really doing this?" Jessica, the eldest at 15, scoffed, eyeing the dilapidated structure that stood before them. The once white paint was peeling, and the windows seemed to stare back at them like dark, empty eyes. "Of course we are," Thomas replied, trying to inject some enthusiasm into his voice. "This is our chance for a fresh start. Just think of all the space we'll have." Emily, the 10-year-old, darted past her father, drawn to the gnarled oak trees that lined the property. "Can we explore, please?" she pleaded, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Let's get settled first," Sarah suggested, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Then we can all explore together." Lily, the shy 8-year-old, lingered behind, clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. "Do we have to stay here forever?" she whispered to Jessica, her voice barely audible. "Just for now," Jessica replied, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. As the family began unloading their belongings, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the property. The sound of their footsteps crunched on the frost-covered grass, the only noise breaking the silence that enveloped the farmhouse. The first few days in the farmhouse were filled with the hustle of unpacking and organizing. However, as Sarah began to settle into her new role as the homemaker, she noticed something odd. Items would go missing: spoons from the kitchen, a shoe from the hallway. Even the girls' toys seemed to vanish only to reappear in the most unexpected places. One evening, as she prepared dinner, she heard a distinct sound coming from the kitchen. It was a low thud, like something heavy had dropped. She glanced toward the source, her heart racing slightly. "Thomas?" she called out, hoping for reassurance. No response. Just then, Emily skipped into the room, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Mom, can I go outside and play?" "Not right now, sweetie. Help me with dinner first," Sarah said, trying to shake off the unease. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The creaks and groans of the old house echoed in the darkness, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She turned to Thomas, who was snoring softly beside her. "Just the house settling," she whispered to herself, forcing her eyes shut. But sleep eluded her. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of the night, the wind whistling through the trees, the distant hoot of an owl, and, faintly, the sound of children's laughter. A week passed, and the peculiarities only intensified. Emily, who had always been a bright, imaginative child, began to speak of an imaginary friend she called Mary. "Mary lives in the attic," Emily told her mother one morning, her eyes wide with excitement. "She says she likes it when I play up there." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Emily, sweetheart, you shouldn't play in the attic. It's dark and dusty up there." "Mary says it's okay," Emily insisted, her voice tinged with innocence. Concerned, Sarah discussed it with Thomas later that night. "I don't like the idea of her playing in the attic, Thomas. What if she gets hurt?" "Emily's just using her imagination. Kids do that," Thomas replied, trying to soothe her worries. "Besides, we can lock the door." Yet, as Sarah tucked Emily into bed that night, She noticed a lingering unease in her daughter's gaze. "Do you really think Mary is just pretend?" Sarah asked, brushing Emily's hair back. Emily nodded, but her expression was uncertain. "She's nice. She just wants to play." The following weekend, Sarah decided to investigate the house's history. She visited the local library and sifted through old records, her heart heavy with dread. What she uncovered chilled her to the bone. The farmhouse had a dark past, filled with tragedies that spanned generations. It was built in the late 1800s, and over the years several families had lived there. Many had met untimely deaths, accidents, drownings, and mysterious disappearances. Most unsettling were the accounts of children who had lived in the house, several of whom had reportedly died in strange ways. One story stood out among the rest. A young girl named Mary who had drowned in the creek nearby. The townsfolk had whispered about her restless spirit, claiming she often played tricks on the living. Sarah felt her stomach twist as she read the account, realizing the connection to her daughter's new friend. With her fears mounting, Sarah returned home, determined to keep her daughter safe. Yet the house seemed to have other plans. The following days brought escalating disturbances, doors slamming shut on their own, shadows flickering at the corners of her vision, and cold drafts sweeping through rooms, making them shiver. Lily began to have nightmares, waking up screaming of the lady in the attic. Jessica, on the other hand, started acting out, refusing to help around the house and becoming increasingly withdrawn. "Maybe we should just leave," Sarah suggested to Thomas one evening, desperation creeping into her voice. "We can't just give up, Sarah. This is our home now. We'll figure it out," he replied, but she could see the worry in his eyes. One night, after a particularly long day, Sarah sat in the living room with a cup of tea, hoping to calm her nerves. Suddenly, she heard the sound of laughter echoing through the hall. It was a soft, childlike giggle that sent chills racing down her spine. "Emily?" she called out, her heart pounding. No answer. She stood up, hesitantly making her way toward the source of the sound, her breath quickening. As she turned the corner, she saw a fleeting shadow dart into the attic door. "Emily, don't go up there," she shouted, but it was too late. Sarah rushed up the stairs, fear coursing through her veins. She burst through the attic door, which creaked ominously as it swung open. The attic was dimly lit, filled with old boxes and cobwebs. "Emily!" she called, her voice echoing in the empty space. Nothing but silence answered her. As she searched, a chill swept through the room, and she spotted something in the corner. A small figure, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes. "Emily?" Sarah's voice trembled as she approached. To her horror, it wasn't Emily. It was a doll, old and tattered, its glass eyes staring blankly ahead. Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. Just then, she heard a faint whisper behind her. "Help me." She spun around, heart racing, but found only darkness. The whisper echoed again, clearer this time. "Help me." Panicking, Sarah turned back toward the door, but it slammed shut before she could reach it. She banged on it frantically. "Thomas! Jessica! Help!" A loud crash echoed behind her, causing her to whirl around. The stack of boxes had toppled over, revealing Emily, who was now standing amidst the debris, her expression vacant. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Sarah rushed forward, grabbing her daughter's shoulders. "You scared me." Emily blinked, her eyes wide and glassy. "Mary wanted to play," she said in a flat tone. "Mary? Who is Mary?" Sarah pressed, a knot tightening in her stomach. "Mary is sad," Emily replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "She needs to go home." "Home? Where is that?" Sarah asked, desperation creeping in. But before Emily could respond, the attic door swung open with a creak. Thomas stood there, his face pale. "What's going on?" "I heard screaming." Get Emily. We need to leave, Sarah shouted, her voice rising in panic. As Thomas rushed in, Sarah turned back to Emily, who was staring into the shadows, seemingly entranced. Emily, come on. We have to go now. Finally, Thomas scooped Emily into his arms, and they rushed out of the attic, leaving the doll behind. As they reached the safety of their living room, the weight of the experience settled heavily on them. What just happened? Thomas asked, his voice shaky. I don't know, Sarah replied, trembling. But we need to do something about this. That night, as they all huddled together in the living room, the atmosphere was thick with fear. They agreed to keep the attic locked and limit Emily's time playing alone. But the sense of safety was fleeting. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and whispers echoed in the halls, reminding them that the past was never truly gone. The family went to bed that night, but sleep did not come easily. As Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she heard it again, a soft, childlike giggle resonating through the darkness. And in that moment, she knew that the farmhouse held secrets, and those secrets were about to unravel. As the clock struck midnight, the laughter grew louder, filling the house with an unsettling energy. Sarah's heart raced as she realized they couldn't ignore it any longer. Thomas, she whispered urgently, shaking him awake. We need to do something now. He rubbed his eyes, confused. What are you talking about? Emily's friend, Mary. I think she's real. We have to confront whatever is in this house. Taking a deep breath, they gathered the girls and headed back toward the attic. With every step, the air grew heavier, and a palpable tension filled the hallway. Stay close, Thomas instructed as they climbed the stairs, gripping the banister tightly. As they reached the attic door, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of dread. They turned the handle, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark void. Emily, you need to be brave, Sarah said, her voice trembling. If Mary is here, we need to let her know she can't hurt us. Emily nodded, still clutching her mother's hand. Mary, Thomas called out, trying to sound authoritative. If you're here, we know you're sad, but you have to leave us alone. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the attic, and the shadows seemed to deepen. The doll rolled across the floor, stopping at their feet. Help me? The voice echoed again, but this time it was stronger, more insistent. Who are you? Sarah demanded, feeling the air thicken with an unnatural force. Mary, the voice replied, sorrow lacing the tone. I want to go home. In that moment, everything in the room shifted. The walls seemed to close in, and the atmosphere grew electric. Shadows danced around them, swirling like a storm. Please, just leave us alone, Jessica shouted, tears streaming down her face. As if in response, the shadows surged forward, and Sarah felt an icy grip around her throat, squeezing tightly. Help! She gasped, struggling to breathe. Let her go! Thomas yelled, his voice rising above the chaos. He reached out, but a force pushed him back, sending him crashing into the wall. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. Mary, you don't have to be sad anymore. You can go home. The room fell silent, the shadows receding slightly as they all turned to look at Emily. For a moment, it seemed as if the entity hesitated. I just want to play. The voice echoed softly, filled with sorrow. Then play somewhere else. Emily pleaded, her innocent eyes brimming with tears. You don't have to be here. As she spoke, the air shifted, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. The grip around Sarah's throat loosened, and she gasped for air. I'll find you, the voice whispered, a final plea before fading into nothingness. With that, the attic door slammed shut, sealing whatever presence lingered inside. The Morgans stood frozen, hearts racing, as silence enveloped them once more. The following days were tense, but the worst seemed to have passed. They kept the attic locked and the girls close, but the house still held an unsettling energy, a reminder of what had transpired. Thomas and Sarah decided to seek help, reaching out to local historians and paranormal investigators, determined to uncover the full truth of the farmhouse's dark past. But for Emily, Mary remained an ever-present memory, an echo of a friendship she couldn't quite understand. She would often stare up at the attic door, wondering if her friend was still there, waiting. And as the nights grew longer, the whispers of the past lingered in the corners of the old farmhouse, hinting that the story was far from over. The atmosphere in the Morgan household grew increasingly tense as days passed since the confrontation in the attic. The family tried to return to their normal routines, but the shadows lurking in their home loomed larger than ever. Thomas and Sarah shared worried glances over breakfast, each aware that they could no longer ignore the turmoil that had invaded their lives. "Do you think it's really over?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Thomas admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But we can't keep pretending everything is fine. I think we need help." The couple spent the day discussing their options, weighing the merits of seeking professional help against the risk of exposing their family's struggles to the world. They had heard whispers around town about paranormal investigators, but the thought of inviting outsiders into their home was unsettling. However, the relentless atmosphere of dread pushed them to their limits. After much deliberation, Sarah finally picked up the phone. She called a local paranormal investigation team, the Winters, who were reputed for their expertise in handling supernatural disturbances. They reminded her of the famous Ed and Lorraine Warren, famed for their work with the Perron family decades earlier. When Sarah explained their situation, her voice trembled with anxiety. "We've experienced things we can't explain. My daughter has become different since we moved in. We need your help." The Winters, Ed and Lorraine, assured her they would arrive that weekend to conduct an investigation. As the call ended, a mixture of relief and dread washed over Sarah. Help was on the way, but at what cost? The day the Winters arrived was cloudy and damp, mirroring the foreboding atmosphere in the Morgan home. The couple pulled into the driveway in a nondescript van filled with equipment. As they stepped out, their calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside the house. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "I hope we're not wasting your time." Lorraine smiled reassuringly. "You're not wasting our time. We take every case seriously. Let's start by hearing your story." As they sat in the living room, the Morgans recounted their experiences. Thomas detailed the odd occurrences, the moving objects, the whispers, and, most importantly, Emily's unsettling friendship with the ghostly girl, Mary. "Emily claims Mary wants to play, but I can see it's affecting her. She's withdrawn and anxious," Sarah said, her eyes filled with concern. Ed took notes, his expression serious. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation. Our first step will be to gather evidence and explore the house's history." They split up to cover more ground. Ed began examining the attic, while Lorraine conducted interviews with each family member. As they walked through the creaky rooms, Lorraine felt an unshakable chill in the air. The house exuded sorrow, and she sensed that it held painful memories. Meanwhile, Ed discovered several old photographs tucked away in a dusty corner of the attic. They depicted a family, clearly from a bygone era, their faces filled with both joy and sorrow. The more he studied the images, the more he felt the weight of their tragic past. In the evening, the team set up cameras and audio equipment throughout the house. Lorraine initiated a session, asking the spirits to communicate with them. The air was thick with anticipation, and the family huddled together, watching with bated breath. Suddenly, the audio equipment crackled, and a voice emerged, soft and childlike. "Help me." The Morgans exchanged terrified glances, and Lorraine's heart raced. "Do you hear that?" she asked. It's coming from the attic. That night, the family was on edge. The haunting had escalated, and they found it difficult to sleep, each noise amplifying their anxiety. Emily had begun talking to herself again, her gaze often fixed on the empty corners of the room. "Mom, Mary says she's lonely," Emily whispered one evening, her expression grave. "Emily, you need to stop talking about her." "She's not real," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But Emily insisted, her eyes wide with fear. "She is real, and she's sad. She wants to play with me." Thomas entered the room just as Sarah tried to comfort their daughter. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Emily thinks this girl Mary is real," Sarah explained. "I don't know how to make her understand." As they navigated the turmoil, the entity grew bolder. The once invisible force began to manifest itself physically. One night, Sarah awoke to find Emily standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes glazed over, whispering to an unseen presence. "Emily!" Sarah gasped, rushing to her daughter. "What are you doing?" "I'm waiting for Mary," Emily replied, her voice hollow. Terrified, Sarah shook Emily, trying to rouse her from this trance-like state. Just then, a cold breeze swept through the room, slamming the door shut with a deafening bang. "Thomas!" Sarah screamed, her heart racing. Thomas rushed into the room, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. He managed to get the door open, and the family huddled together, shaking. "Something is very wrong," Thomas muttered. "This is more than just a harmless ghost." The Winters team, still on site, had captured several unsettling phenomena on camera, including objects moving on their own and strange sounds reverberating through the halls. They compiled their findings and prepared to share them with the Morgans. As the investigation continued, Emily's behavior worsened. She began to exhibit signs of distress, waking up screaming from nightmares, claiming Mary was angry. The entity seemed to have a hold on her, drawing her deeper into its tragic past. One evening, as the Winters reviewed the footage from the previous night, they captured a chilling scene. A shadowy figure loomed over Emily as she slept, its outline barely discernible. The footage sent a chill down their spines, confirming their worst fears about the entity's intent. Desperate for answers, the Winters team researched the history of the farmhouse. They discovered records of the original family that had lived there, a family marked by tragedy. 3 children had died in accidents, and 1 had vanished without a trace, leading to whispers of a curse that hung over the property. "That's it," Ed said, piecing together the dark puzzle. "These spirits are trapped here, unable to move on because of the traumatic events that unfolded in this house." As the team prepared for a cleansing ritual, the Morgans felt a sense of unease. Sarah and Thomas exchanged worried glances, fearing the potential consequences of provoking the spirit further. On the night of the ritual, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The Winters set up candles and protective symbols throughout the house. They gathered the family in a circle, holding hands, ready to confront whatever awaited them. "Stay strong," Lorraine urged. "We need to show them they're not alone and that it's time to move on." As they began the ritual, the energy shifted dramatically. The air thickened, and the temperature dropped. Emily began to tremble, her eyes wide with terror. "She's here!" she cried, pulling away from the group. "Emily, stay with us!" Thomas shouted, trying to hold on to her. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed through the house as furniture toppled over. Shadows erupted from the corners, swirling violently. The candles flickered ominously, casting distorted shapes on the walls. "Get back!" Ed yelled, raising his hands in a futile attempt to ward off the chaos. "We need to stay focused," but the entity resisted. The walls seemed to vibrate with anger, and Lorraine's voice became drowned out by the cacophony. "We can help you. You don't have to stay here." In that moment, The entity unleashed its fury, throwing objects around the room. A heavy bookshelf crashed to the floor, narrowly missing Thomas. Sarah screamed, pulling her daughters close. "Stop it! Just stop!" Sarah cried, feeling the walls close in. Then, a voice echoed through the chaos, shrill and haunting. "You can't take her. She's mine." Emily's body went rigid, her eyes rolling back. The Winters exchanged panicked glances, realizing they had awakened something far more malevolent than they anticipated. As the house trembled, Ed and Lorraine pressed on, desperately trying to reach the spirit. "We know you're suffering, but you have to let her go." The shadows swirled violently, and Emily fell to the ground, convulsing. "Mary, let me go," she screamed, her voice a mixture of terror and defiance. In a moment of clarity, Emily's eyes locked onto her mother's. "Mom, help me!" she cried, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Emily, I'm here!" Sarah shouted, her heart breaking. She lunged forward, reaching for her daughter as the entity writhed in protest. Lorraine stepped closer, her voice firm. "You have to leave this child alone. You have no claim over her." The energy in the room shifted, and a bright light flickered around Lorraine as she invoked the protective symbols. "We are here for you, to help you find peace." But the entity roared, a sound that resonated through the very bones of the house. "She belongs to me." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and the room plunged into darkness. In that moment, a chilling silence fell over the chaos. The team and the Morgans held their breath, uncertainty gripping them. Then, a piercing scream erupted from Emily, reverberating through the stillness. "No, I won't let you take me." In a flash, the lights blazed back to life, illuminating the room as the entity recoiled, revealing a glimpse of its true form. A twisted silhouette of a child, eyes wide with despair. "We need to finish this," Ed shouted, his voice cutting through the fear. He rallied the team, and they joined hands, channeling their energy towards Emily, willing her to break free. "Emily, fight it. You are stronger than this," Sarah urged, tears streaming down her face. As the team focused their energy, the dark figure began to dissipate, screaming in anguish as it fought to hold on to its connection to Emily. The struggle intensified, and the air crackled with energy. Finally, with a burst of light, the malevolent spirit shrieked one last time, "You will never be free," before vanishing into the ether, leaving behind a profound silence. As the dust settled, Emily collapsed into Sarah's arms, her body shaking. The warmth of her mother's embrace brought her back to reality. The Winters team stood back, breaths heavy, the weight of what had just transpired settling in. "We did it," Lorraine whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But the scars remain." The family held each other tightly, feeling both relieved and exhausted. The air felt lighter, but the echoes of what had occurred lingered in the corners of the house. "We need to talk about what just happened," Ed said, his tone serious. "There's a lot to unpack." The Morgans listened intently as the Winters explained the history of the house, the tragic events that had unfolded, and the spirit they had encountered. They stressed the importance of healing, both for Emily and for the family as a whole. In the days that followed, the Morgans worked to rebuild their lives. They sought therapy, and Emily slowly began to find her footing again. The shadows in the house lingered, but they no longer felt suffocating. As the seasons changed outside, the family found solace in one another. They held onto the hope that the darkness had been banished, but they knew that they would forever carry the weight of their experiences. With the Winters' guidance, they created a space for healing, focusing on love and togetherness. They learned to navigate the remnants of their ordeal, united against the darkness that had once threatened to tear them apart. The investigation into the haunting had come to a close, but the journey of healing was just beginning. The Morgans understood that while they may never fully escape the shadows of the past, they had each other, and that bond would be their guiding light through the darkness. As they embraced the challenges ahead, a new chapter unfolded, one marked by resilience and hope. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, ready to reclaim their lives from the grip of fear. The farmhouse stood silent, a shell of its former self. The air was thick with tension, each creak of the floorboards echoing the trauma that had unfolded within its walls. Emily, now 13, often found herself lost in thought, staring into the distance as shadows danced along the edges of her vision. The encounters with the dark entity had left her shaken, and while the immediate danger had passed, its lingering presence clung to her like a shroud. Sarah noticed her daughter's growing withdrawal. "Emily, do you want to talk?" she would ask, but Emily would only shake her head, her eyes reflecting a fear that words couldn't express. The family tried to return to normalcy, but it felt like walking on eggshells. They no longer felt at home in the farmhouse. It had become a reminder of their ordeal. Jessica, Emily's older sister, had taken to isolating herself in her room. She believed that by keeping her head down, she could escape the grip of the haunting. Thomas tried to support them both, but the burden of his wife's increasing anxiety weighed heavily on him. He often caught Sarah staring out the window, lost in thought, her brow furrowed with concern. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the fields, Sarah decided it was time to reach out for help. She gathered her family in the living room and proposed they contact their neighbors, the Pedersens, who had shared stories of their own struggles with hauntings. "We need to connect with others who understand what we're going through," Sarah said, determination sparking in her eyes. "We can't face this alone." The following day, Sarah knocked on the Petersons' door, her heart racing with anticipation. Mrs. Peterson opened the door with a warm smile, and they quickly fell into conversation. Over cups of tea, Sarah learned that the Pedersens had experienced unexplained phenomena: objects moving, cold spots, and eerie sounds at night. They had battled their own darkness but found solace in the support of one another. Inspired by their discussions, Sarah and the Pedersens decided to form a support group for families who had faced similar hauntings. They reached out to the community, spreading the word and inviting others to share their experiences. One by one, families began to join, forming a network of support and understanding. As they gathered in the Morgans' living room, sharing stories of their encounters, Emily felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in her experiences. Listening to others recount their struggles helped her find her voice again. One woman spoke of a lingering spirit that refused to leave her home, while a man shared his encounter with a dark figure that haunted his children. Each story resonated, and as the group met regularly, they began to build a foundation of resilience. They discussed ways to reclaim their homes and lives from the grips of fear. Despite the progress they made, the specter of the entity still loomed over the Morgans. Emily began experiencing vivid nightmares again, reliving the torment she had faced. She would wake in the night, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. The shadows in her room seemed to whisper secrets, tugging at her sanity. Sarah, worried about Emily's mental state, sought guidance from Lorraine Winters, who had helped them before. Lorraine agreed to meet with the family again, sensing that the spirit had not fully relinquished its hold. During their meeting, Lorraine's expression grew serious. "The entity is powerful, and it feeds off fear," she explained. "We need to confront it directly, but this time we must understand its past. It's tied to the land, and there may be unresolved issues that keep it anchored here." With renewed determination, the Morgans and the Winters team began researching the history of the farmhouse. They uncovered a deeper connection to the land, a tragic tale of loss and sorrow. A child had died in the house under mysterious circumstances, a victim of neglect and abuse, which may have left the spirit seeking comfort in the living. Armed with this knowledge, the Morgans and the Winters team planned a final confrontation. They decided to perform a cleansing ritual, during which they would communicate directly with the spirit, offering it the peace it never received in life. They set a date for the ritual, selecting a stormy night when the energy would be potent. As the storm rolled in, the family gathered in the living room, the atmosphere charged with tension. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind howled outside, creating an eerie backdrop. The team set up candles and arranged the room for the ritual, each member focused on the task at hand. Lorraine led the way, guiding everyone in a series of chants and prayers. "We are here to honor you," she called out to the spirit. "You are not alone. You can let go of your pain." Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. A heavy presence filled the room, and Emily felt a familiar chill crawl up her spine. The spirit's energy pulsed in the air, seeking recognition and validation. "Show yourself," Ed commanded, his voice firm yet compassionate. The shadows coalesced into a dark figure, flickering like an old film. A child's face emerged, twisted in sorrow, eyes wide with despair. "Why won't you let me go?" it cried, its voice echoing through the room. "We want to help you," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We understand your pain. You don't have to be alone anymore." As the storm raged outside, the room became a battleground of wills. The entity struggled against the warmth of their collective compassion. It flickered, wailing as memories of its tragic past flooded back. Moments of neglect and isolation, cries that had gone unheard. With each passing moment, the Morgans and the Winters team poured their energy into the ritual, offering the spirit their love and understanding. "You are free to move on," Lorraine implored, tears glistening in her eyes. "You no longer have to haunt this place. Find peace." Suddenly, the room exploded with energy as the entity fought against its release. The lights flickered violently, and the temperature plummeted further. Emily stepped forward, drawn to the spirit. "I'm not afraid of you," she declared, her voice strong. "You can be free." The dark figure shuddered, its form wavering as it reached toward Emily, who stood resolutely. "You are not alone," she continued, recalling the stories of others who had fought similar battles. "You can find love and light." In that moment, the spirit seemed to pause, confusion written across its face. The energy in the room shifted, allowing a glimmer of hope to penetrate the darkness. As the storm continued to rage, the Morgans and the Winters team held hands, channeling their energy toward the entity. "We release you," they chanted in unison, their voices rising above the thunder. With a final, anguished wail, the spirit began to dissipate. Light erupted from the candles, illuminating the room as the entity transformed from a figure of despair to a bright, ethereal presence. "Thank you," it whispered, finally finding the peace it had long sought. In an instant, the air felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifted. The storm outside began to calm, and a sense of serenity settled over the farmhouse. Emily collapsed into her mother's arms, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," Sarah whispered, her heart swelling with relief. In the days that followed, the Morgans felt a profound change within their home. The shadows that once loomed now seemed to retreat, leaving behind a newfound sense of peace. Emily began to reclaim her childhood, laughing and playing with her sisters. The weight of the haunting finally lifted. The family continued to attend their support group, sharing their experiences with others who were still grappling with their own shadows. They discovered strength in unity, and Sarah became a pillar of support for others, sharing the lessons learned from their ordeal. As they transformed the farmhouse into a home filled with love, the Morgans also sought to honor the spirit that had haunted them. They dedicated a small corner of the yard to create a memorial for the child who had suffered, planting flowers and lighting candles in remembrance. In doing so, They found closure not only for the spirit but also for themselves. The farmhouse, once a place of fear, became a sanctuary of healing. The echoes of the past were still present, but they no longer felt suffocating. As the seasons changed, the Morgans flourished, embracing life with renewed hope. They celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and the simple joys of being together, fortified by the challenges they had overcome. Emily, now a bright and spirited teenager, found her voice in creative writing, crafting stories that reflected her journey. She understood the importance of sharing experiences, of letting others know they weren't alone in their struggles. With each passing day, the farmhouse stood as a testament to their resilience, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, love and understanding could light the way. The Morgans had faced the shadows of the past, emerged victorious, and transformed their lives into a beacon of hope for others. As they gathered around the dinner table one evening, laughter echoed through the halls, blending with the memories of the past. The Morgans had reclaimed their home, turning it into a space filled with love, where the ghosts of their past became lessons of strength and unity. And so, the farmhouse, once haunted by despair, became a home filled with light, where every shadow whispered stories of courage and healing, a legacy they would carry forward into the future.